In this video, you're going to be creating and running your very first Meteor application. We're going to use that command line tool we installed previously, and by the end, you're going to have a working web application open inside of the browser. Let's go ahead and get started by opening up some of the programs we're going to need to get this done. Now, the first thing we need to do is create a place to store all of the projects we're going to make in this course. You're free to do this anywhere on your machine you like. I'm going to go ahead and do it on the desktop, and we'll be creating our folder for all of our projects by opening up the terminal. We're also going to be running the Meteor command from the terminal in just a few seconds to create and run the project. To get started, I'm going to navigate to the desktop. Depending on your OS, you might need to run a different command, but most operating systems start the terminal in the user directory, which means you can use cd space desktop to navigate to the desktop. You can use ls on OS X or Linux, or the dir command on Windows to print the contents of the current directory. If I run ls, I see desktop right here, which means I can use cd to change the directory to the desktop folder. Once I'm here, we can use the mkdir command on all operating systems to make a directory. And the directory we're going to be making is called Meteor-projects. And I'm going to create all of our projects for the course in this folder, giving us one central place for the course code. Now, once you have that folder created, you can go ahead and change directories into it. You can see it was created over here on my desktop. I'm going to use cd followed by the directory name, Meteor-projects, to navigate into that folder we just created. Now, once you're in the place you want to create your project, we can get started creating our first project using the Meteor command line interface we installed. Now, I want to give you a quick warning. When you create a Meteor project, it's going to generate a lot of boilerplate code. Now, if you're like me, boilerplate code is annoying, it's frustrating, you didn't write it, you're not sure how it works. It's just complexity added on to an already complex thing, making web apps. But I promise we're going to be ripping all of that boilerplate out in the next section and building up from scratch. So for now, just bear with me as we look through some files with a lot of gibberish inside of them. Right here, we're going to run our first Meteor command from the command line interface, starting with Meteor. Now, Meteor is the command we want to run. We then provide Meteor with the action we want to take. There are a ton of different actions we'll be using throughout the course. We're going to be using create. This is how we start off every single Meteor project, by running the Meteor create command. Now, it does take a project name as well. We have to specify that. We're going to call this one hello -Meteor. Now, when we run the Meteor create command, it's going to do quite a few things. First up, it is going to create a hello Meteor folder in the Meteor projects directory. Next up, if it's your first time using the Meteor command line interface, which it is, it might need to install some tools. Now, that means your command might take significantly longer than mine just took, but that's okay. It's only going to happen the first time you create an app. Next up, it is going to dump all of that boilerplate code in the hello Meteor folder, and it's going to set up all of the dependencies that your Meteor app needs by default. When it's done, you should see some output that looks something like this. Here, it actually gives us instructions on how we can start up our application. First, we need to change directories into the new folder that Meteor created for us. We need to run Meteor npm install, which we'll talk about in detail later. And finally, we're going to use Meteor to run the application. Now, Meteor comes with its own version of npm, the node package manager. This just creates a nice bundle. You don't have to install anything separately. We have to use Meteor npm install to install some of the dependencies that Meteor has from the npm repository. Don't worry about that. We're going to be adding and removing our own dependencies from npm later. You will be intimately familiar with the Meteor npm install command. For now, since we're just going through the boilerplate project, we're going to run all of these as specified. First step, we have to navigate into that folder. I'm going to use clear or CLS on Windows to clear the terminal output. Then we will cd into hello Meteor. And once we're here, we're going to go ahead and run the first command using Meteor. That's Meteor npm install. This is going to install some dependencies in our project, and it really should just take a few seconds. Next up, we're going to use Meteor to start up the app. You can also use Meteor Run. They have the exact same effect. One is just an alias for the other. I'm going to go ahead and use Meteor Run just to prove that you don't need to use the command they outputted. They're just showing you the shortcut. Both get the job done. Now, when you do start up your app with Meteor Run, it's going to do quite a few things. It's starting up your web server, it's starting up a MongoDB database, and it's compiling your application files into a nice minified, concatenated bundle, making sure that your app runs really, really smoothly. When it does go through the whole process, you should get a URL dumped to the screen. This is the URL that we can actually visit to see what the Meteor boilerplate project looks like. So we can go ahead and open up our browser and navigate to it. You can either copy the URL or simply go to localhost 3000. And right here, we have our boilerplate Meteor app. This is how all Meteor applications start. It's a little example where you can click a button to increment some number, and there's various links to the documentation, the guide, and other tutorials. A lot of these are useful. We'll be talking about them. These are the pages on the Meteor website we saw previously. Now, this is the boilerplate project. It's very simple, but it gives you everything you need to get started. Don't worry about the details here. We're going to be ripping all of this out. For now, let's go ahead and take a peek at the code behind the scenes, seeing how all of this fits together. I'm going to go ahead and open up Atom, my text editor, and we're going to open up that directory, the Hello Meteor directory. I'm going to do this by opening it up. I'm going to the desktop, the Meteor projects folder, and right here we have Hello Meteor. And once it's open, we can start taking a look at the files and folders behind the scenes. First up, we have a .meteor directory. This directory is super important. It's used by Meteor behind the scenes to manage various versions and packages. Things like what node version you're using, what Meteor version you're using, what MongoDB version, and what version of all of those Meteor libraries you're using. We're never going to directly change this folder, so don't update any of the files, but we will be updating it via running commands from the terminal. Next up, we have our client and server folders. The client folder is going to store the assets required to get our website up and running, like you see here. We have three main files. We have a main.css file. This is going to store the styles for our project. Currently, it's empty, but we could go ahead and add one right now. Don't worry about the details of this code. We're simply going to use a star selector to select every DOM element, and inside of the curly braces, we can specify some style properties. We are going to set the color equal to red. That's color : space red with a semicolon at the end. Now, when we save this file, the Meteor application is actually going to go through the entire build process again. And you can see behind the scenes, it automatically updated the web app. Another fantastic tool built in to Meteor. You don't have to configure any of that stuff on your own. It's all set up for you. We can go ahead and remove that change, save the file again, and our application is restored to something a little easier on the eyes. Next up, main.html. This file stores a lot of stuff we're never going to be using. These are Blaze templates, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be swapping out Blaze for React, so you do not need to worry about what exactly is happening here. All we're going to do for the moment is take this h1 tag inside of our HTML body. This is things rendered to the screen, and we're going to change it from saying welcome to Meteor to hello space world. We can save the file, and once again, in the background, our application is going to get reloaded, and now we see hello world printing to the screen, which is fantastic. Next up is main.js. Once again, this stores a lot of Blaze related stuff. We're going to be ripping all of this out, so do not worry about exactly what's happening here. All you need to know is that main.js is the client-side JavaScript file that our application is going to start with. So if we want to do something here, like alert the user or render some sort of modal, that's going to happen in our client-side JavaScript. We'll be starting from scratch in the next section. Inside of the server folder, we have one file, main.js. This is the JavaScript file that's going to run on the server. This is going to be a file that contains node code. Currently, it doesn't do anything. We simply use a Meteor startup method to attach a callback that fires when the application is ready. We'll look at all of this in detail, as well as what exactly this line is, the import line. Don't worry about the details of any of the files. Next up, we have a getignore file. We'll be using that later when we add version control. And we have a package.json file, which is going to come in handy when we start adding third-party libraries to our application. For now, though, the boilerplate code really isn't too bad. We have a couple client files, we have a couple server files, and we have a couple config files we can ignore for the moment. All of this together creates our application. Now, as you've probably guessed, Meteor needs to know exactly what files belong where, so it does use very strict guidelines for those folder and file names. Your main.css file in the client folder is always going to be the one it grabs by default. We'll look at how to extend and build these out later, but for now, don't go ahead and change anything like the server directory name or the main.js file name. These are specific file and folder names that need to be in place in order for Meteor to work as expected, in order for it to bring all of this stuff together, creating a web application. Now, if you head back into the terminal, you are going to see that some stuff has changed. Right here, we have some new message. We have client modified, refreshing X3. This is letting you know that your application was changed and the client refreshed 3 times. Now, we're going to see this output and other pieces of output inside of the log from our running application, but this is the most common one. Your app simply letting you know that it has changed and it has refreshed the client. That is it for this video. We've taken some time to explore the boilerplate and we've explored 3 Meteor commands. We used Meteor create to actually create this directory and all of the stuff inside of it. We used Meteor npm install to install the necessary dependencies, and we used Meteor run. This allowed us to start up our application and view it over inside of the browser, and that is all it takes to get started with Meteor. Now, in the next section, we're going to be tearing down the boilerplate code, and we're going to be building up our application from scratch, so you'll know exactly what goes into creating a Meteor app, because you will have written every single line of code. I am super excited to get to it, so let's go ahead and dive right into the next section where you create your first real-world app with Meteor and React.